Welcome to the Deal Final Corner. So this is your weekly property talk show brought to you by Property Filter, hosted by myself, Guillaume Black, your favorite Frenchman, the CEO and co-founder at Property Filter. As you know, it's the UK's highest rated platform to find deals, and we are on a mission to empower our property investor and deal sourcer members to find another 1,000 deals this year thanks to the Property Filter blueprint. The purpose with your Deal Final Corner is to give you more and the best of the available resources by inviting expert guests who will share with you the latest and most current strategies, tactics, and secrets about what actually works right now in terms of finding and making deals and the reality of systemizing and running a high-performance business in property. So it really is my pleasure to introduce to you guys a very dear friend to me to this Deal Final Corner, Mr. Danny Inman. Danny is self-proclaimed accidental founder of the Prosperity Network with over a decade of experience in the property industry, having been involved in way over 1,000 deals. He's a seasoned property developer, constantly managing a pipeline of between 25 million and 50 million pounds worth of property and deals. He's passionate about property investing, and he talks about it extensively. So if you are connected with Danny on social media and things like that, he's got an interesting opinion to follow. So he always likes to share his knowledge, insights through quite a unique and refreshing approach to property education, I have to say. So currently venturing and focusing on the hospitality sector with his brand Juice Hotels. So they've been operating in the hotel sector for quite a few years now, and the plan is to build it up to 5 buildings. That's the current pipeline, with 2 sets coming out very soon. So these are like pretty impressive deals, He's a true deal maker, a serial entrepreneur, focuses on business growth while managing multiple business ventures and while always investing. So he splits his life between the UK and Dubai. And Danny is a true believer of abundance and creative win-win scenarios in everything he does. And outside of business, he's an avid fan of food, which I relate a lot to, travel, and sadly, a Manchester United lover. So no one's perfect. So very much happy. So I don't care about football. I'm just teasing you a bit. So really happy and excited to have you on today's Deal Final Corner. So what you can expect from today's episode. So insight over a decade of property deals, how you can adapt to strategies in this current and changing market. And then, as always, with Danny, exclusive, honest advice from a seasoned investor. And then we'll have time, hopefully, for a Q&A. So without further ado, I'm very much looking forward to hearing about Danny's talk today. So please give Danny a massive Property Filter virtual welcome to Mr. Danny Inman.
Oh, thank you so much, Glenn.
Over to you.
Hell of an intro. Let me just get the presentation up. Hopefully you should be able to see that. You can see that, Glenn?
Indeed, yeah.
There you go. So, as Guillaume said, I'm just going to introduce you guys to me very briefly and talk about what is almost now 2 decades actually in property. So I started at the tender age of 22 and just coming up to my 39th birthday now, and it's been a hell of a ride. I just want to give you a sort of whistle stop tour over what we've done in the almost 2 decades, what we're doing today, and how time in the market and timing in the market have both worked for us over those 2 decades. So hopefully that makes some sense. If you want to follow on socials, I'm sure some of you already do. A handful of you, I'm quite sure, will follow me already. But Prosperity Network is our company, and Danny Inman Property is me. And anywhere on social media and online is pretty much me, Danny Inman Property. So Guillaume gave me a great intro there, so I won't go into too much depth in what he's already covered. But briefly, I played professional rugby league. I signed professionally in rugby league at the age of 15. This is me on an academy tour to Australia, playing rugby league with England. Played to a very good standard. Learned very, very quickly that you could get paid not too much money and your body gets bashed around quite a lot. And I realized it wasn't going to be for me. Went to university, did a civil engineering and advanced maths degree, first class degree in that, had a scholarship with Lang O'Rourke, a big engineering firm, and literally a few weeks into that realized that wasn't going to be me either. So hit a bit of a crossroads, and in back end of 2009, 2008, 2009, I was sent to one of the trainings that I'm sure a lot of you guys will know, where the old American style seminar, rush to the back of the room. And I was sent by a couple who'd already done the training several years previously, had a decent amount of success in property. And I was actually sent as the free ticket, as the plus one to their son, basically. So there was a spare spot. I was at a loose ends after walking out of university and walking away from rugby, having disappointed both mum and dad. And I was sent as the plus one to somebody's education, property education training. And that was my start in property, effectively, my first eye-opening. At that point, all I knew was that parents had a mortgage and they were the ones that were responsible for paying it. But for me, relatively logical in my approach, and hopefully uh, you'll feel, and if you know me, you'll probably feel I do okay in getting along with people. Property being about solving problems uh, in a logical way and getting along with people sort of resonated with me. Since then, 15, 16 years down the line, we've been involved in well over 1,000 transactions now. We've built and sold large property businesses, including a letting agency that had over 1,000 tenancies at the point that we sold it. We're very active developers. We have an active pipeline of between 25 and 50 million at any one point. A lot of that is the apart hotel model, which I'll come to a little bit later. We've just built 4 £2 million houses in Cheshire. We've got a block of 9 flats, a block of 10 flats completing. So we're pretty active generally in and around the property space. And as Gillum said, we're the founder of, or I am the founder, the accidental founder of the Prosperity Network, a membership group that's around 1,100 very active property investors. And it started with a tantrum during COVID. So basically, when COVID hit, my feeling was that the property education world, a lot of the people in it were doing one of two things. They either sold on the basis of fear, it's the end of the world, the great crash is coming, clean up, blah, 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 or they completely disappeared after taking money off people to educate them. So I threw a bit of a tantrum and just said, okay, no one knows what's going on. Let's just do a free Zoom. Everybody jump on Zoom. I just posted it on social media, and we had 900 people on the first call in the first week. So it was mad. Obviously, case of perfect timing. I think people just wanted that calming, quiet air. We did 12 weeks worth of free calls. And then we thought COVID was over when the first lockdown was eased. We thought that was it, away you go. And people were asking, what's next? What's next? And we had nothing in planned. So we basically rushed together the Prosperity Network. And 4 years on, just 4 and a bit years on now, we are a group of 1,100 and growing, very active, serious investors. I'm very proud of what that has become. So that's a very quick version of the journey. The interesting thing for me is I don't really like property, as in practically enjoying property. And I hate construction. I really cannot stand construction. It doesn't resonate well with me. I don't get along with builders. They don't get along with me. We don't speak each other's languages. So I've done this on the basis of building a business around a product that I enjoy the fruits of the product, but the physical product itself I don't enjoy. And a big part of the delivery of the product I've had to delegate because I definitely don't enjoy. And I've partnered with my business partner who's specializing in the construction space as a result. So you don't have to love it all. Hopefully that's an indication. You can delegate the bits that you don't like. And you can focus on where your strengths are within the space. And that's hopefully what you'll see that I have done. This subject as a whole, why this subject? I think what I've saw during my 15, 16 years in property, and obviously I post quite aggressively on social media. I post some of these reflections often. Some of the things that I've seen that there's a pattern in the type of people doing certain things that typically fail in our space. I've seen people that have done things well, done things badly, scaled up rightly, scaled up wrongly, tried to jump too quickly, and all various things. And there's a number of learnings I think that have come from that. The one thing that has helped me in my engineering background is having the engineering background. So the logical step-by-step milestone approach has been what's probably helped me have most of my success in property since I first started out effectively. So talk you through some of the learnings, what's next for us, where we're looking to invest and move into, and then I'll just show you how timing the market and spending time in the market have both worked for us, and they can both work for you depending upon how you approach things on a strategy perspective. So, as I mentioned, I got educated in November 2008, which was pretty much slump time. You could see the market had been through its peak, was now starting to reduce, and the slump was imminently following in 2009, 2010. I think that I would say I've probably now done a full cycle through that. There's a lot of argument on whether prices have actually crashed. I believe that prices crashed in 2022 to 2023 when we had our real house price crash, where inflation was up at 11, 12%, and house prices were -1, -2, depending upon what reading you have. So I think on a real house price level, we've had our crash, and I've seen this full circle now. This is how the market works. Having been through the full cycle, through the stages of the full cycle, I strongly believe that you can see the signs in market changes in advance. And there's not a perfect time. No one will ever be able to time it perfectly, but you can take advantage if you understand how the cycle works on best times to sell if you need to sell, best times to look to invest and hold, and buy for the long term if you need to. So that's effectively what I think we've done. I have a lot of interest in the market, and I actually think we are heading from recovery to boom as we head into the market now because of various things. But I think the fact that supply demand are so out of sync still, even though demand has increased a little bit, supply is massively out of sync. And I think availability and liquidity of finance and affordability of finance are about to hit a very peak level where there's going to be a lot of money put into the system. So I think we are recovery into boom as far as the market's concerned. So having seen a full cycle, we're probably from a relatively privileged perspective as having seen markets working in various ways, strategies working in different ways in different times, strategies having points of being very strong and high demand to changing a little bit, but it always comes back full circle, and that is the cycle of the market. When I first started, I had absolutely zero money. I'm probably one of those annoying people that people would put up as a poster boy who did start with no money whatsoever. The training that I was paid, the training that I was sent on, that was paid for me. I was sponsored effectively by the couple to do it with their son, and paid them back very generously in sourcing deals to them. But the first thing that I did was source deals effectively. So this was long before deal regulation and registering an AML with the HMRC and all of that. This was sourcing before sourcing was the flavor of the month. But all I knew was that I had a load of time, no money whatsoever. I was surrounded by a network of people who were looking for stock, and I just went out and found stock for them. And if you think of the market that we were in 2009, 2010, money in, money out deals were everywhere. Estate agents were a great source. There was more available stock with more distressed vendors at good prices, less buyers because there was less available finance in the market. It was a great time to be cash rich, or to be surrounded by cash rich investors, which is what I made my task. And I sourced heavily for the first 18 months. These are just typical examples I've put on here. 2010 example source deal, bought for 65,000, refurb and fees in the good old days, 15 grand. Done up value at the time was 105 grand. It rented for £600 a month. This was the bread and butter stock that I was sourcing typically. And I've just put up some more recent examples of sale prices on the same street. You can now see 180 grand are typical valuations now on this street. This was a 2-bed, we turned into a 3-bed. 180,000 are now typical. So you've got about an 80% growth in values over the, what are we, 12 years, 10 years. So time in the market massively works in your favor. These rent for about £1,000 a month now. That's 895, but that's a little bit out of date. But they're in around £1,000 a month, and rents are growing between 5 and 10%, depending upon where you are in the country. So I look back on a lot of this old sourced stock and think I wish I didn't give it away. So in the words of Frank, regrets I've had a few, but then again, a few to mention. But it was my way, and I think a lot of people have got to get over themselves in the way that you invest. You invest in the way that's right for you at that time. I sourced well over 100 deals in the first few years. I look at some of those deals now, and the prices I sourced them on were probably half of what the values are now, quite comfortably. My learning for me was that I sourced far too much. I sold too many of these deals, and it was ultimately because that was my developed comfort zone. I was very scared at this time, 18 months in. I didn't buy a property 18 months until 18 months in. I was very scared to raise any angel money, to use angel money. I was quite comfortable with other people taking the risk on my behalf. They would take the investment risk. I would do the sourcing. I would take a bit of a fee. No risk for me. Away you go. And now looking back, I wish I'd have got my hands dirty, got stuck in a little bit more, raised a little bit of money a little bit quicker. And that's probably one regret I have. One thing that or a few things that I never did, and I'm glad I haven't, and this will probably make some sense as we go through the call. This is a post I did on social media, and it was in 22, 23 I posted this. And the main reason I posted this in 22, 23 was because there was a lot of panic at that point about the market crashing. I couldn't see it. I quite famously, or relatively famously, I guess, in the property social media world, had a pretty open bet with somebody who was being very loud about how the market was going to tank and it was going to drop 15% in the next 12 months. And I had a bet saying it wouldn't even hit 5% based on economical factors. I won the bet and the money went to charity. I wasn't too interested in the money, but the reason I posted this at the time was because of all the noise that was going on. It was just a little bit like, okay, if the market changes, these are the people who get burned in a property market crash. And you can see the headlines there. I'll rush through them very, very quickly. But typically, it's people who built their business on low rates between 2016, 17, 18, I would say, probably 18 and 2022, we were so spoiled on interest rates. And I never, ever, ever rushed to compete to get these 1, 2, 3%. I've actually probably historically overpaid on interest rates compared to other investors because for me, it was more about speed and certainty. I wanted my money in and out of a deal going on to the next one. So I would use the likes of Together Finance at 5, 6% when people were using Kent Reliance, TMW, whatever it may be at 3, 4%. And for me, it was about certainty of exit. But a lot of people had built their business that it only worked on low rates. Margins were too tight. The second rates went up, it would squeeze their margin and they get themselves in trouble. Realistically, we should all be, and the one thing my education taught me was to stress test your interest rates and make sure you're running them at rates far higher than you can achieve. And that was a big one. People who built their business on low rates and were dependent on low rates were always going to get themselves in trouble. Anyone who over leveraged, took too much debt out, first charge, second charge, had no margin in their deals, couldn't afford any change in house prices. If the lenders reduced their LTV on refinance, there was no growth. All of these guys took themselves into an interesting position. Typically, any market correction of around 15% could be swallowed. It could be swallowed by my portfolio quite comfortably. For a lot of other people, if they can't afford that market correction and can't afford to get out at that price, they caught themselves in trouble. The other one is people who keep taking the cream. Every time there's a bit of growth in the market, they'd refinance and not necessarily invest that equity into another asset, but they would spend it on lifestyle, new car, home extension, whatever it may be. Every time, take the cream, take the cream, take the cream until there's no cream to take, and then they got themselves into trouble. And then the others are people who panic. I saw so much panic through 21, 22, 23. People were saying that rates were going to get to 10 to 12%. People paying tens of thousands in early repayment charges to fix it. Ridiculously high rates just in case they got too bad. Everyone who sold in 2020 because they were worried it was the end of the world probably sits there today and regrets. Anyone who sat on cash for 3 years between 2020 and 2023 lost 30 to 40% of it in its spending power because they were panicking on what to do. So panic is a terrible strategy. People who panic always end up getting themselves into a spot of bother. People who bury their heads, don't face up to their problems, don't manage their letting agencies, don't talk to their investors, don't face up to lenders if lenders have got challenges with them. People with badly managed businesses, poor quality finish, bad maintenance, wrong tenant qualification, no diversification, completely dependent on one strategy, not managing utilities, expensive management, long-term tie-in contracts, all of these things, they typically can get themselves burnt. And people with poor business models, I've seen people who do joint ventures where they give too much away to the JV partner. There's no margin for them. Models that are built on unsustainable margins like low rates, high rents, 100% occupancy. So very, very strategy dependent models. There's some terrible business models in property. And I think if you have a strong business model, you will survive and weather most storms in property. If you've got a shitty model, it's going to come under challenge the most in property as well. So, at some point, a relative correction will always happen in the market. It's the key is to not be scared of it, understand the cycle, try and work with the time and timing of the cycle as much as you can. And make sure you don't get caught out because, as Uncle Warren Buffett, one of my favorite people, says, it's only when the tide goes out do we see who has been swimming naked. So, I mentioned earlier my logistical approach, probably an engineer's approach. This diagram made a lot of sense to me. So, investment triangle, build a solid foundation on the base with your buy-to-lets, your low entry trades, scale up through social housing, multi-let being non-licensed, non-planning HMO being licensing and planning, small conversions, and then up to the top of the investment triangle, where's large conversions and development, which is what we're typically doing right now. And you raise up that triangle with time and experience in the market, building the right team in the market. But as you do raise up that investment triangle, you have to understand that your risk level, your exposure, and your entry cost, the cost of entering this market, typically deal size, cost of refurbishment, administration costs, professional fee costs, all rise as well quite significantly as you go through that triangle as well. So like an engineer, I like structure, I like milestones, I like targets. My first target was that I was going to do £2,000 a month from buy to let, build a solid foundation before I then moved up and scaled through these strategies. I had a combined strategy where I would leave some money in 2 or 3 deals and then I would flip one to re-subsidize the pot so that then I had more money again to leave into the next 3, flip one, subsidize the pot. And I had a PPR plan, principal primary residence plan, which is basically scaling up through your own residence in a tax-free way. Because obviously the sale of your primary residence as it stands today is tax-free. So that was more of a legacy plan, wealth building plan that we wanted to run alongside everything that I was doing here. And this is what we've done. That's what getting rich quick looks like. It says 14 years there. Now it's 16 years. Sourcing for between 2009, 2011, started with buy-to-lets 11, 13, little bit of crossover with flips, flips and social housing 12 to 14, HMOs, multi-lets 14 to 17, small conversions 14 to 17 too, and then the large development stuff is 17 to today basically. We do all of this now, but it's basically what your focus is on is dependent upon the time and experience in the market and your risk and comfort and risk and entry costs. I talked about flips. One of the biggest things that we always liked to flips was bungalows. If bungalows typically always sold well for us. The reason bungalows sell well is typically it's downsizers, typically it's cash buyers. The other big thing about bungalows is that they have a typical life cycle. So what you find with the bungalow is somebody moves into a bungalow today and they plan to stay into that bungalow until the day they die. Okay. And that's what they do typically, or day they die or the day they go into care. So bungalows are typically outdated because they were bought modern 15, 20 years ago. Person's living in there until end of life or until they move into care. So they're typically outdated, typically need a refurbishment, don't often work on a buy-to-let basis, aren't typically what a buy-to-let investor looks for. And the new buyer of this, so today's person who wants to move into this, wants it modern by today's standards, but don't want to do the works to get it modern by today's standards. The other big benefit is that older people generally care most about keeping warm. So often double glazed central heating is usually new, which is obviously a big part of your costs. This was one done very early. I can't remember what year this was. There you go, 2014, early in 2014. St. John's Avenue in Warrington. Purchase price was 90,000. It says 90 plus one there. The plus one was for the son who brought it us and wanted us to buy it for his dad, but he wanted a cash incentive to sell it to us, basically. So we bought it for 90,000, gave him a sourcing fee of 1,000, refurbed it for 22,000, sold it in August 2014 for 140,000. Sold again in 2019, same property, 193,000. Obviously, we didn't sell that. And then 2 doors down today in 2024, yeah, May last year, that sold for 255,000, exact same size, exact same similar spec. I was probably better actually because it was refurbished. Number 13, ours was number 17. So you can see flipped because it served us at that point in time, made roughly 20 grand, let's call it, for ease of cost. That 20 grand went back into the pot, subsidized the buy to let money. However, if let's say the market would have turned, we had to hold it, we had to refinance it, time in the market would have worked for us as well in both 2019, where we could have realized an extra 50 grand, or even today in 2025, where we could realize potentially up to an extra 100 grand on what the sale price was. So timing was right for us to flip it because it was part of our strategy at that point. If that hadn't have worked, time in the market would have worked for us massively as well. Social housing, this is the typical social housing we did. I don't know if anyone knows Runcorn, but we could pick these up for between 45 and 60,000 usually. Values were between 75 and 80,000. This one was a 55,000 purchase. Runcorn, Halton Council. These are 3 beds that had the ability to convert to 4 beds. The 4-bed LHA rate in Runcorn, even as far back as, what year have I got on here? I think this was around 2013, 14 as well. Even back then, the LHA rate was 850. That was upwardly negotiated from 750 because the council had such a large waiting list for 4 beds in Runcorn. So if anybody knows anybody from Runcorn, and no offense from people in Runcorn, but a lot of people in Runcorn don't work, and a lot of them are very good at reproducing, and that's the reason that there was a high social housing requirement for 4-bed houses in Runcorn, basically. So the market rent at the time was 525. We were getting 850. Mortgage costs 218, management fees 85. This was a social housing contract where you had to self-manage. It wasn't a contract where the council took management. They just provided the tenants and guaranteed the rent. Operating expenses, cash flow 418, let's call it 5 grand a year on a £55,000 purchase. Fantastic, incredibly cash flowing property at that point in time. You can see in this area, market appreciation's been a little bit less. These are probably worth about 100 grand now. You can see 98 here, 100, maybe 110 grand. So much slower appreciation on capital, but that's not the reason it was bought. And there is still appreciation in that area. These are private rentals now at 825. I think the LHA rate's about £1,000 a month now. So my mistake here, didn't buy enough of these. Didn't push the contract hard enough, or the terms of the contract hard enough with the council. I think we could have probably got more still. We probably could have got operating expenses paid by the council, etc., because the demand was so high. But again, a decent deal that we helped scale up with. Then we first went to HMOs, again, a little bit accidental. This is 2013, so proper HMO growth for us came probably 14, 15 onwards. But this was the first one that we did. And this was a dental surgery. So here and here, 2 buildings, basically full dental surgery. What we did is we had a letting agency at this point I mentioned earlier. The letting agency took the bottom left, the uppers, and effectively this L shape became a 7-bedroom HMO in the first instance. 7-bed or 8-bed, 8-bedroom HMO in the first instance. Market price 220,000. We bought it for 140,000. Again, good old days, but remember, numbers are proportional. Refurbishment of 45,000. Converted to an 8-bedroom HMO with office use on the ground floor. Numbers in 2014, £90 times 8 times 52 is 37 grand a year. Mortgage, I've kept simple at 70% and 6%. We actually did a repayment mortgage on this, so our figures were slightly different. But if this was an interest-only mortgage, operating expenses at 20%, management although we had the letting agency at roughly 10%. Gives you cash flow of 1,560, and we got the office for free effectively. The numbers as it stands today in 2025, obviously we don't occupy the office anymore. We've got 9 bedrooms now, so we converted the office with planning, the remainder of the office to another room, another kitchen, did 9 bedrooms, 51,480 now. So you can see the growth in rental income is significant. It's doing cash flow of 3,000 a month. That was if we kept the same mortgage on the same purchase price, not refinanced. We actually have this fully unencumbered now. We don't have a mortgage on this anymore. So the cash flow is purely net. So 24th of June 2013, bought for 140. 16th of February 22, we got revalued at 350. I thought that was a bit harsh. It's probably worth about 400 now. I think we'd sell it for 400 quite comfortably at those income levels. So we had 7 years of 35,000, now over 55, now over 50,000, pretty much trebled in value. Time and inflation has pushed us to, at the time, 40% leverage. We have no mortgage on this now. So don't wait to buy property and wait. Time and timing in the market can be your great friends. So we bought 40 to 42 on this street. We've done 38, 66, 89, 91, and 93 on this street since. This is the only one we still own. No mortgage repayment over time. The reason we keep property unmortgaged is we basically got something we can secure quickly against. So one of our strategies was to have something, or a few things actually now, but something unencumbered, so that if we needed to secure a quick bridge to buy something, we needed to throw the property in as cross collateral, we could do that effectively. So that is what we did with that HMO. Bumps in the road, very quickly on this one. I've had a couple. Typically, their JV's gone wrong. And whenever I've done a JV, it's always been for the wrong reasons. It's usually to be, I've put the money on the pedestal, or I've tried to take a shortcut up the investment triangle. And this is a prime example of me taking a shortcut up the investment triangle. The education department, or the education company I was working with, I basically got spotted by somebody within that company who saw that I could have access to deals, I could raise money. I was doing some decent things. I didn't qualify the partners well enough. I just took their experience and qualifications at face value. I brought angels to the table. I brought buyers for the end stock to the table. And what had happened is we went and bought several pubs around the UK, all over the UK actually. The other partners had agreed high interest bridges. We couldn't exit, we couldn't refinance because one of the other partners had a big issue on his credit file that flagged up. When we came to refinance, we got buggered basically. So at the age, I think of around the time I would have been about 26, 27, I had to clean all of this up. It cost me 65,000 because I wanted to make sure none of my buyers and none of my angels lost any money. So I sold this to somebody, and then I ended up paying for a big chunk of the refurbishment myself out of my own pocket because I didn't want them to lose out off the back of my sale. So a couple of learnings from that: trust everyone but tie up your camels. Basically, trust but verify. If you're going to go and work with somebody, make sure that you understand what it is they're offering, understand roles, responsibilities, understand what part you play, understand expectations on all sides. Back my own ability. Don't shortcut the way. If you've got the ability to do it yourself, because you cannot shortcut the way, do the work. Take accountability for your own cock-ups, and don't abandon the fundamental rules of investment. Off the back of that, I then went and specialized in large HMO conversions, something that we did quite heavily. We were taking commercial properties, large commercial properties, underutilized. This was a former accountancy office. A lot of them were moving away from the high street into more specialized, like the Regus office campuses. And we were doing HMOs in emerging towns, blue collar towns, so not major cities. I'm from Warrington. We were doing them in Wigan, Widnes, Runcorn, St Helens, Leeds. But sorry, Leeds was major. Bradford, Wakefield. So emerging blue collars. We were probably one of the earliest to take the lead in that space on larger HMO stock. And we were changing the HMO market because when we first got into it in 2013, it was all bed sits, and bed sits had a bad rep. It was drugs and LHA and all of this bad reputation that bed sits had, and we were moving just steady standard ensuite rooms effectively that were good for professionals, internationals, Eastern Europeans, and everything like that. We reached a peak of 350 rooms in 2017. One thing that we did do is beat the boutique rush. So the boutique rush is what happened is that people started to overspec, for want of a better word. They were basically specking beyond the level of supply. So we were offering a good level, 90, £100 a week. People were coming in and offering an incredible room for 130, £140 a week. But what happened is so many rooms, so many volumes of rooms came into the market at that level that the 140s started to come down to 120, 110. And then it didn't start to make as much sense on return on capital, the level they were spending to refurbish them for the rents that they were getting. Our model still made more sense effectively. So we beat that rush. We focused on commercial to HMO conversions. A lot of them were conditional. We were exchanging. Completion was conditional upon getting planning approval for what we wanted to do. In this case, I think it was a 13-bed HMO. I think this was. That'll come up in a second. We bought this for 135,000 because it was commercial, no stamp duty, under 150. And it worked for us. So office to HMO conversion, purchase 135, exchange with conditional completion, spent 85,000 including all fees, all refurbishment fees, and total spent including fees. You can see it's fully detailed here, 113,000, so 248,000, and it was a 14-bed with 9 en suites. Obviously, that gets commercial valuation. The commercial valuation you can see here came in at 374,000 based on investment valuation, based on the rental income. These are the cash flows, obviously relatively significant. What we did do between 2017 2020, and I probably called it wrong if I'm honest. No, I called it right at the time, and timing or time in the market has effectively meant it was wrong. So it was the right timing, but if I'd have spent more time in the market, I'd have seen even more benefit. So when we sold this, we sold it based on a 15% yield. You could see the commercial valuation here was 374,000. We sold this at 400,000 based on a 15% gross yield. So above commercial valuation at the time. I thought that HMOs were peaking. It was taking a slightly longer to fill rooms. Effectively, so many rooms had come onto the market that the supply had increased and the demand was taking time to catch up. So we thought that we could get rid at the peak of the market, get them occupied and get rid, which is largely what we did with a lot of this stock. 400,000, so made 143,000. But if we'd have waited a little bit longer, and this is a couple of years old, it's even higher than this now today. It's probably, as of today, doing about 75,000 in rent, and we'd probably be able to sell a 12% yield today, which would probably get us in excess of 600,000, another couple of 100,000 more. So this is the cyclic nature of it. That 400,000 was the peak at the market at that time. Now we're probably about 550, 600,000. If we'd have held, we'd have collected a bit more rent and would have took the profit. But for me at that time, it was the right timing for me to sell and realize that profit that's gone into other developments. Waiting wouldn't have hurt either, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. So time and timing could be your friend in the market. And these are loads of opportunities. These are just some of the ones that we've done. That's 38 Busey Street. That's Albert Road. I've just shown you. That is the Sovereign in Wakefield. That was a 20-bed, 18-bedroom in Runcorn, the Boathouse. We still own that. 91 Busey Street, 40 and 42 I've shown you. This was a 28-bed former care home, Hollybush on Lovely Lane. This was a 13-bed Old Liverpool Road, 2 9-beds on Wilson Patton Street, 66 Busey Street was a 5-bed, Arpley Road a 7-bed, Broughton Drive a 9-bed. So basically we sold 200 rooms-ish. We've got around 120, between 120 and 150 rooms left now. And what we sold the ones that were taking a little bit longer to fill, that were probably more on the outskirts, that were harder to manage. So we sold a lot of the bigger ones. We sold this 20-bed. We sold this 14-bed. We sold this 13-bed. So we sold a lot of the bigger ones. And a lot of the ones where we could get the best yield-based price is the ones that we've sold. And now we're at the top of the investment triangle. We're doing commercial to resi conversions, have been for 5 or 6 years. Of all varieties, we have 25 to 50 million in the pipeline at any one point, and you know we're right at the top of that investment triangle and have been since 2017 effectively. The reason we wanted to get involved with that, and we do a lot of mixed use stuff. So we've just finished, for instance, anyone knows Wakey Wines, TikTok famous Wakey Wines. Apparently, we own the Wakey Wines building. We've converted the bottom floors, 13 retail shops. We've done 27 flats on the uppers. Um, I think the high street is changing. I don't think it's dying. I think big retail is dying. I think small retail has got a big resurgence coming and it's continuing to come. And we're seeing that anything that we can build that's underneath small business rates, get qualifies for small business rates relief, we're typically filling quite quickly. So we understand that there's a lot of big retail or big offices that can be ground floor, smaller retail with larger uppers as well. So we back the high street. We think the high street's got longevity. It's just changing and not dying. We think there's big need for residential occupation in the town centres, and actually it's the way that the government is talking about saving town centres, is bringing people back to live there. We've always tried to get slightly ahead of the curve. So you'll see with our strategies, we did sourcing before sourcing was the real thing. We've done HMOs on scale and HMO conversions before people really got into them. We beat the boutique rush. We went into the retail conversions before a lot of people did that. Our apart hotel model, you know, we probably got slightly ahead of the curve with that as well. So always try to get slightly ahead because that's where you make more money. The later you get in, the less margin there typically is. And we've always picked tenancies or properties that others would deem less attractive or more challenging because that's where you can negotiate your best rates. We've always wanted to watch the market. Market has no emotion, so I get along with it. I'm quite emotionless. The people within it have a lot of emotion, but the market doesn't respond that emotionally. It responds more logically than people give it credit for. And try and understand that all markets work in cycles. So this is where we are today, Juice Hotels. So this was number one, Juice Hotel. I posted about this on Instagram the other day, so you can see a picture of me in 2016, I think it was, holding a set of keys in front of this. This became our first apart hotel in 2021, 21 units, restaurant and bar. Very successful now. This 90% occupancy pretty much every week's doing over 750,000 a year in income. This is Wakey Wines, 27 flats. It looks a bit different to this now, but 27 flats above the 13 retail units on both sides. Harrogate will be finished in March. This was a post office in Harrogate, so ground floor retail will have 26 units above there. Museum Street, that's just got planning for 42 units. These two we're just buying from the council, so this is number one. These are going to be two more buildings with all of this parking. We're buying direct from Warrington Council, who want us to do more apart hotel units. We'll get another 40 across there. So this market, I think we've got a bit ahead of the curve. I actually think the reasons Premier Inn and Holiday Inn and all of those guys are going to Serco contracts is because people don't want low end stays anymore. And also people are staying in apart hotels for longer, mainly contractors, mainly professionals and corporates, especially in apart hotel one, Juice One for us. And they want a home from home. So a lot of our typical market is 25 to 35 square meters, fully self-contained apartments for people to have a home away from home, high standard, and they're willing to pay slightly higher rates. So some of the things for you always to consider wherever you are in the market as a buyer. Where are we in the market? As I've said, I think we're here. I think we're in recovery. We're seeing rentals increasing, stocks tightening a little, prices rising a little. If money becomes more readily available, I think we'll go from recovery to boom. And it might be a good time for you to realize some of the capital you've got tied up if you've got some poorly performing equity in your stock. And that's what I will look at selling. Basically, I look at return on equity. So if we do go back into that boom cycle, I will look at how much equity there is in any one deal, how much income I'm getting against that equity. Could I be doing more with that equity in other investment opportunities than I'm doing in that deal? If so, I could sell. It doesn't really matter what I'm selling. You've got to decide what you want to sell, when you want to sell, and why you are selling it, as long as that's right for you. And it's based on what you need for you right now. Always be obsessed with the goal, but flexible in the method. Don't be afraid to change, but don't change too soon. Okay, I would say that my mistake is I'm probably moved from the bottom foundation too quickly. I wish I'd have done more buy-to-let stock in 2010, 11, 12 when it could be bought at pennies. But I moved up the system almost too quickly, although it was more methodically and periodically. There's no wrong time to sell, in my opinion, and that's something I've learned in hindsight. Even though some of the stuff you could see is worth hundreds of thousands more today, I don't still think that there's a wrong time to sell. I think there's wrong reasons. I think if you're selling because you're panicking, if you're selling because you haven't qualified your exit properly, if you're selling because you aren't willing to wait, some of those things might be the wrong reasons, but there's not a wrong time. There's only a wrong reason, in my opinion. And if the market works in cycles, shouldn't we? We're buying stuff today for the first time in quite a few years that was stuff we would have bought when we first started. Categorically, I will buy a low entry buy to let today. We will buy a lot of ex-council flats. We really enjoy them, pick them up 40, 50, 60,000 pounds in some parts of the Northwest. We'll rent for 40, 450, 500 pounds a month. We're quite comfortable with that stock. And a lot of people go, isn't that too small for what you're doing right now? I think that's where the market is. I think for the last couple of years, low entry stock has been a decent opportunity. HMO stock, even though I sold over 200 rooms, I would categorically buy HMOs again today. I think I think HMO rents are going to increase rapidly. I think they are increasing rapidly already. I think they're going to continue to do so. Um, so as I said, be obsessed with the goal, but flexible in the method. If the market's working in cycles, it's important that we are working in cycles too. Hopefully that helps, Glenn. I don't know if I've gone over or ranted on too long or what, but
No, no, it's amazing, Danny.
efficient.
No, no, it was really, really insightful, and I took pages and pages of notes. So thanks so much, super valuable. What a career, huh? What a career you had. I'd never heard the full story, so really glad you gave us the time to go through this. I'm wondering if people have got some questions for Danny, so hit the chat, and then we'll go through them at a time. I was wondering, with the with people, you said you stayed in your comfort zone for too long with the sourcing,
Yeah.
and you didn't. You said it's funny because everyone has got these glass ceilings type, like mindset things, and even today you said I wanted to make the way you phrase the sentence, it's almost like you didn't want the risk, but you felt involved. I can't remember. I should have noted it. But how do you help? What at that time? What made you jump to move to the next thing?
Yeah.
And what would you say to people today who are a bit like maybe risk adverse, and the deal is too good to be true. If they accepted the offer, there's got to be something wrong with it, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a mindset transition. I think what I said was I was more comfortable with everybody else taking the risk as the buyer and me just taking a fee. And that was a comfort
Mhm.
zone I'd got myself stuck into. I was happy for somebody else to take on the perceived risk of doing the deal, the refurb, the refinance. What if it doesn't value up? What if it doesn't do this? Da, 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 da. And I'll take 3 grand, wash my hands of it, and sort of move away. I started to get comfort in my own ability out of watching all of these guys refinancing and the numbers coming back in where I'd forecasted that they were going to, and they were quite happy. And I knew that once people were coming back to me asking what's the next deal, that the deals were going probably pretty bloody well, and I should probably buy them myself. My mindset's completely changed now. Like my mindset is Dr. Pepper on everything. What's the worst that can happen? What is the worst case scenario? When you first start out in property, every deal that you do is so important. Like it's the end of the world if that deal doesn't go right, if everything doesn't go to plan. 15, 16 years in, you sit there going, very few deals go exactly as expected.
Yeah.
Actually, the worst case scenario is I break even or lose a little bit of money. No, does it matter? We're protected by volume, we're protected by activity. So maybe there's a blaseness or a bit more of a market understanding. But I go into every deal now with what's my worst possible outcome, and it's usually not that bad. Like Seneca says we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality. And that's definitely the case in our space. I definitely believe that. So if you can try and attach that Dr. Pepper mentality where it's okay, I've spent a bit of time, not made as much money as I thought, is it that bad? I don't think so.
Yeah, you're right. And then volume protects you, you know. So, you know, I'm often quoted, you know, encouraging people to, you know, doing more deals is actually easier than doing fewer deals, because all of a sudden you mutualize your resources. I mean, it's just a lot easier, you know, follow up on everything. You know, you just, I've got the same engineering mind, you know, I think as you have from the civil engineering, you know, and things I did before, which is quite similar. And so everything is logical. My end, I agree.
Yeah.
And on the, you know, on the next steps, you know, like, how did you get into how did you get into the different the strategy after the buy to lets, you know, and then so you flipped the bungalows. That's quite interesting and insightful.
Yep.
The old positioning that they're quite dated, so they're always good refurbs, and then you sell them to cash buyers. That was really really interesting. And how did you go through those ladders on your pyramid, you know?
I just milestoned it really, and so as I said, I wanted 2 grand from buy to lets first, and I was only flipping to resubsidize the capital pot to leave into buy to lets. In hindsight, I'd have wished I'd have done more buy to let stock. I then went into the social housing model because I was doing buy to lets in and around Runcorn, and it
Hmm.
became clear that there was a social housing need, and that the social housing need was 1 bed, single men really, and 4 beds, large families. So that's how we moved into the social housing space. Then the HMO space, as I mentioned, the first one that we did was we're looking for an office. Oh, there's a big building. We can buy the big building. We don't need all of that building as our office. What should we do with the rest? And not accidental, but I would say circumstantial is how we've moved through each space. But I've had the comfort to move through each space based on milestone figures, whether that's cash flow or capital. I want to make X amount before I change strategy or change focus is probably the right thing to say.
Hmm.
Whereas today, we'll do anything, we'll buy anything today, but I'm now full time in property with a big team, with access to capital, access to funders, and all of that. So I don't have to be as selective. I think what happens when people first start, you get told to niche down, pick an area, pick a strategy, stay in that area and da 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 da. And people can often stay there too long.
Hmm.
Uh, and not open up their avenues. So if that's right advice if you've got limited amount of time, you're in a job, 9 to 5, and you can only spend one day in one area viewing properties and blah blah blah. But as you start to progress, your ability to do more should progress as well. And 2025 now we yeah, we'll buy anything. We raise a lot of money. We're consistently in the market. We're developing um the best part of 30-40 million's worth of GDV at the minute. So yeah, I wish it was as systematic as can
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
but it was definitely milestone based on sort of income levels and capital levels and experience levels.
And I'm guessing your investment triangle might have evolved a little bit over time. And the one you shared with us today is how much of this was pre-planned, and others, how much of this is like with hindsight, this has been the blueprint we followed now.
I saw this triangle early, and my version of the triangle is probably an edited version of somebody else's triangle many years ago. I saw, and I just like the logistical take the step
Mm,
when more time, more experience. Um, there have been a couple of accidents along the way, and our apart hotel model is a complete accident. And sometimes you just have to go with your gut in property, and no amount of education can swing it. So the apart hotel model that we started was literally, and I put this in my social media post about it the other day. Um, it's just a big building in the center of my town that's very well known. And I just thought that is too big for that price. We need to buy it. So we bought it without really a clear plan, if I'm honest. It had loads of problems, problem tenants, but I thought it was worth £1 million and we paid 550. So sometimes property can be as simple as that's a bloody big building, bloody cheap. I
yeah,
think to do something with that. And the apart hotel model was, I work from the Village Hotel. I used to work from the Village Hotel before we got this big office. I worked there quite frequently. Um, And I just was astounded by how busy it was every day. You know, speaking to the girls on the reception, and they're going, "Yeah, we're full again, full again, full again." I'm like, "Who's staying here? Who stays in Warrington this much?"
Mm.
Uh, and it turns out four of the top 10 corporates in the UK are in Warrington: O2, Vodafone, Carphone Warehouse, United Utilities, Hermes Brakes. They're all based in Warrington. So there's so much corporate here, but it was a complete accident. So sometimes you go with your education, sometimes you go with your gut. I think 90% of the time be led by education, but be willing to listen to your gut at times as well, I'd say.
Yeah, awesome. A question around the economy and
Mm.
the sort of market cycle. I think the question is around I don't know if if you're able to come back to your little diagram you have, or but your
Yeah.
flywheel of the market. I think that's quite interesting, and for I encourage everyone to follow Danny on Instagram or Facebook. You're quite vocal about these bits and the economy and commenting all the time. And I guess this is a model. And then the question is, isn't there stagflation heading? So aren't we in stagflation heading to recession or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, recession is an arbitrary statement, isn't it? We had a
Yeah,
recession last year, and you have to zoom out really to understand the general picture of the economy. I don't think the UK economy is in a great place as a whole, um, because of growth. But what I will say is liquidity is strong. People have money in the UK. Affordability is strong. We've had wage growth faster than inflation for quite some time. Some part of the issue is the lack of spending. People haven't been spending that money, and people are sitting on their hands a little bit because of media portrayal. Businesses are sat on their hands because they're worried about policy. So I think growth is going to be very, very average when you talk about the economy as a whole. Um, but affordability is strong. You know,
yeah,
we if you look at the repossession rate, um, it's less than a fifth, I believe, of the 2010, 2011 sort of rates of repossession financial crash, which is obviously significant back then. But the level of impact of increased interest rates hasn't been as impacted as people suspect because of affordability. So it's not that people don't have the money, it's that they're not spending it. And that's what needs to come back. There needs to be a bit more confidence. I do think that will come. I think we've reduced interest rates. I think the forecast last week, although it's changing every week at the minute, but the Bank of
hmm,
England forecasting for rate reductions in 2025. I'd be surprised if they don't reduce in Feb. I think they've got to inject a little bit of confidence into the economy. Right now, we're in stagflation. It's how long that lasts in practicality. And a lot of that will be down to policy, I believe. It's not down to liquidity. We don't have a money crisis like we had years ago. So if the market gets stimulated uh, in any way or several ways, as they often do, then I do think we'll go from recovery to boom. I do think the
yeah,
housing market had its impact in 2023 when affordability of everything else went up and housing stayed maybe dropped a little bit. So, yeah, I think it's quite different to any other historical crash in that it's not happened nominally, it's happened in real house prices, and that's
yeah.
took a lot for people to get their head around.
Yeah.
Um,
Considering inflation, yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, if you
yeah.
consider
That's a very
inflation.
good point. Yeah,
It's definitely happened. Everything else has gone more expensive versus housing, and salaries are up considerably. So I do think the affordability is there. I do think if interest rates drop, that will see house prices increase, and how fast they increase will depend on how quickly they drop. The other big play is if they have to drop too quickly, there's a real fundamental economy problem, and if there's a real fundamental economy problem, that will leak into confidence on house buying. So we're in a fine line. I just don't think the economy is as horrific as people first fear. I think the rhetoric around the economy is quite bad, and we need to stimulate growth in some way. And that's what Labour, unfortunately,
mm,
depending upon your political allegiances, that's what Labour have got to try and do. It's what they really, really, really did not do in the last budget. They had a horror show of a budget. because it wasn't a budget for growth at all, and
Yeah.
the growth is what we need.
So you comment on this quite a bit on your socials, and you got the membership you say for the Prosperity Network, and I suppose so. I don't know the details, but I suppose you run weekly or regular updates for
Yeah, yeah.
for the group and things. So all comments you have on deals and the economy, like basically you keep your members up to date. So how does that sort of work?
Yeah, no, we have weekly calls similar to you, to be
Yeah,
honest. So we do our weekly calls on a Monday night, pretty much the same as you. They're all
yeah,
recorded. So I think we had 175 on our call on Monday. A lot of New Year, New Me vibes and people pushing in. But we start with a market update, what's happening, what major announcements, what economic announcements, what impact
hmm
they have, and then we typically have a mortgage update, a rates update, and then we'll have a main speaker that talks about subject matter like a decade of deals or whatever it is at that
yeah.
time. People on Monday who've moved from Aberdeen to Oman, their portfolio sent them there, and they're running a remote investment business
Wow,
on now. So yeah, we've got a full range of, we get complete newbies to people doing 200 deals a year, basically. So every
amazing. Question from Daniel. Hi, Danny. Really enjoying your progression through the different strategies. You were saying about buying HMOs currently because, foreseeing that HMO rents would go up. Are you talking about buying HMOs that need work or converting new or following this boutique rush type strategy?
So I'd buy either at the right price. It's obviously price dependent, but we've got a purchase going through at the minute of a HMO that doesn't need much work at all. Obviously, what I recommend buying would depend on your buying position, goals, etc., etc. But we'd buy either. We'd buy ones with value add. My ultimate feeling with HMOs is I think the rental market's getting driven from the bottom, for want of a better word, but entry level of rental upwards,
Yeah,
um, because we just don't have enough stock. There's a rental crisis on every level. When you
yeah,
talk about affordable housing, when you talk about social housing, supported living, NHS housing, normal HMOs, student HMOs, every article, I read something about the MEN in September where Manchester University were paying people to stay at home because they didn't have the housing provision for them in Manchester. So they're actually physically paying people. So I think the demand is doing what demand will do. It's going to drive the rents from the bottom upwards. And I think that will continue to happen. I can see HMO rents growing at between 8 and 10% a year for the next 3 or 4 years. So even if you bought at today's value, if you bought well at today's value and it's performing and cash flowing at today's value, I think you'll see a 25 to 30% increase in rental incomes over the next 3 to 4 years, basically. And that return on investment will be a significant increase. So the ideal is always buy well, add value, refinance, maximize your return on investment. But if I could buy something done at a decent price in an area that I'm confident that there's a growing demand or a consistent demand, I would do that as well. I'd go in either space.
yeah, awesome. And one last question, we're on, tax and lots of policy changes. Government going after the landlords. Can personal owning landlords keep going?
It's hard, is what I would say.
Yeah,
I'm quite vocal about this. I think hobby landlordism is dying.
yeah,
I believe that. I think it's very tough to be a hobby landlord now. And if you look at, which is interesting because I think I saw a stat, I'll share it with you and you can share on with them. But I believe that around 95% of rental property is owned in personal names.
mm,
So if you've come into property recently, even like me today, and we're in this environment where it's professional landlords, we think everybody owns properties in limited companies. But 95% of all rental property is still owned in personal name. And something like 60% of that 95% only has one property. So those guys are almost certainly going to get out and are getting out very, very quickly. Um, I think any one personal name up to five properties, there can't be a phenomenal amount of value for you to be in the space typically with the legislation
yeah,
changing. Um,
yeah. You're basically an HMRC employee, right?
I just think the whole market is professionalizing, and everybody's got their conspiracies around this and what that means. But if I'm the government, I want the market to operate in a way that's easier for me to track. Nobody wants, the government doesn't want people taking old school rents in cash and
Yeah.
unregistered property and all of that. So I just think professionalization of our industry is the big thing to come. And I think the hobby landlord, if they're not dead already, they're on their way. So I
And these are great people to buy deals from, right? They've made their
100%.
money. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of them are sat on big equity. Most of that stock, like the 95% stock, a lot of that, more than half of that has no mortgage.
Mm.
So a lot of these guys have realized their equity over many, many years. Some of them can be quite creative in how you structure deals, that they're a great target audience. Most of the stock I'm saying to people at the minute to target is landlords in the 1 to 5 category. If you can get into those guides, personal name landlords 1 to 5 category, I believe they should get out. I think it's a good time for them to get out. And I think they've got a good opportunity to realize capital to do so. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be a hobby landlord in this space. Wouldn't make sense to me.
Yep. Okay. Darren is asking, did you say, Danny, that singlets were coming back? And if I understood well, if you were to remortgage, leave some money in, how long would you expect to get your money back in rent? So basically, what
ROI.
makes a good yield? What makes a good yield or ROI on singlets? Those council flats you were talking about, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think they're coming back in 100%. I actually think the peak of them coming back in has probably temporarily passed. I'd say we're hitting that where it's going to be hard for them again. So what happened was when COVID hit, house prices grew far faster than rents, and
Mm.
that meant that yields were
Yield.
low. So when you're selling on a yield basis, your yield's considerably lower. It makes it tougher. Between 22 and 24, house prices stagnated and rents kept going and going and going. And rent, obviously, as a result, yields increased. So between 22 and 24, we really filled our boots on a lot of the low end buy to let stock because the yield return was there for us to do it. It's now started to turn a little bit. So 2024, depending on what measure you look at, was between a 4 and 5% increase in house prices and an 8% increase in rents. So the margin's getting a little bit tighter. It's still good. It's still in the favor of rents. If rates drop quickly, you will see that house prices increase faster than rents, and that's the yin and yang of how our market works. So yeah, it's been a good time. It's still just about a good time. If rates drop much further, it will get a more challenging time on cash flow because you'll be competing with first-time buyers, home buyers, who are happy to pay a little bit too much. We've always been anything 15 to 20% return on capital left in. If it does more than 15% return on capital and it's a solid buy-to-let stock, we'll buy it, but we've obviously got the capital as it stands today to leave in a deal. Back in the day, we used to want 35, 40%, leave very little capital in so that we could, when we were subsidizing it, we only had to subsidize it every 3. Now our subsidization comes from cash flow
Yeah.
effectively, a self-fulfilling beast. But 15, 20% up, I think there's enough stock like that out there at the minute. Return on capital left in. So post
Yeah.
refinance, how much have I left in? How much is my cash flow? What's my annual return? 15 to 20% is typically where we're happy.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. Thanks so much. Danny, do you have a closing sentiment for us today?
Just get busy. I think you've got a good opportunity. It's a decent market to find deals. I think we're just coming to a point where it might get tough, and hopefully I've clarified in advance when if you start to see rates dropping too quickly and you start to see a bit more activity, you see stock going sold subject to contract on Rightmove a bit quicker, you see people paying pretty much close to asking price even though it needs a refurb. That's when you know the market is tightening and it's getting a bit tougher, and that might be a time to start considering some of the stuff that you might sell. But just watch the market, be clear that time in the market works, and timing, and if you combine the two, timing and time in the market, it works especially well. Just make the right decision for you at the right time based on the right parameters. Don't panic, and that's the easiest way to not get caught swimming naked.
Yeah, awesome. Danny, really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us today. Thank you everyone for joining us on today's Deal Finder Corner. In the meantime, until we meet next time, go on propertyfilter.co.uk, log on to your Property Filter account, go and have an endless supply of deals. Join the top 1%, become a high achiever Deal Finder Corner. do more deals in less time. And do check out Danny's socials. So do follow him on socials if you want more of these. He's very vocal and sharing all the time. Have a look at the Prosperity Network website. There's lots of interesting things. You can have a look there if you're interested in the membership and things like that. I do recommend. I only hear good things about it. So have a great one, and speak with you all very, very soon. Have a great one. Bye-bye.